Hello my friend, my name is Ted and my channel is Tesla Details. I have some questions for you about tire rotation. How much would you pay for a tire rotation? How far would you drive and how long would you wait in a tire shop to have a tire rotation done, especially if that's the only thing that's being done? Can you combine that trip with some other opportunity like a service call or some other shopping? These are all things to factor into your life in owning an electric vehicle like a Tesla. The tire rotation interval for a Tesla Model 3 is 6,250 miles, which is about 10,000 kilometers. And if a lifespan of a tire is 50,000 miles, that's 8 tire rotations for one set of tires. Now that's the shortest interval for any of the service, so unlike having an internal combustion engine vehicle wherein you need to have the oil change or some other fluids exchange and you can kind of throw in that tire rotation, a lot of times we're going to be left with just having a tire rotation. So you have to kind of think about, is it worth paying Tesla or somebody else to do that for you?
Looking at the manual, the maintenance schedule shows all the usual common sense safety stuff and high voltage precautions. And if you focus in on the actual maintenance events, you'll see there's not that much to do. No oil changes, of course. Brake fluid every 2 years and coolant every 4 years. And inside of that, the only reason you might go to a shop is for the tire rotation. And this is why I choose to do it myself.
Now, the cost of a tire rotation may range from free if you bought your tires from a tire place that does the tire rotation for free. Tesla charges $87.50 to do this, either a mobile service tech or at the service center, and that's a nice dinner out for four. It's not nothing.
What does a tire rotation cost if that's the only thing you're having done?
I want to say it's $87.50.
Okay.
And there's no charge for me to come here and perform the rotation. I would just come here and it would just be $87.50 and that's it.
Other tire shops are going to charge anywhere from $0 to $150 as I've seen. And if that's the only service you're having done, is it really worth going to that shop? The reason for tire rotation in the first place is to even the tread wear on all the tires so that they perform well and that the tread wears down evenly on each tire so that they all reach their end of life at the same time. And in the simplest sense, this can be accomplished by simply swapping the drive wheels, that's the rear in this car, with the front wheels back and forth several times during their lifespan, and that will just even out the tread wear. However, there are other little subtleties to do with swapping right to left, front to back, obliquely, diagonally that is, that has to do with the forces applied in cornering and driving, rotating the tire one direction and the other direction when in drive. So most tire manufacturers recommend crossing the tires to the drive axle, and in the case of this car, crossing to rear, or in the case of a front-wheel drive car, crossing to the front. I just think of cross to drive. And so there are sort of two ways that you may rotate the tires on this Tesla. One very easy, which is the one that Tesla uses for $87.50, and the other one that the Michelin and other tire manufacturers recommend, and is what I learned to be the traditional way to rotate tires. Now, if you're the kind of guy that likes to do this at home, I have a few ideas for you that are a little unconventional and that play to the unique aspects of an electric vehicle that has the huge battery pack underneath it. That limits the jacking points. Now, typically, you would just jack up the car in one place a jack stand adjacent to that jack point along the subframe of the vehicle, and then move the jack elsewhere to perform the wheel swap. However, we only have these 4 approved jack points in the Tesla, adjacent to the battery pack and ever so close to the battery pack that you absolutely must avoid jacking or placing a stand under. Now, there are the suspension knuckle and the lower control arms that in some burlier vehicles I would consider placing a jack stand under. However, there's no recommendation in the Tesla manual to do so. So the tools needed for this home tire rotation I'm about to show you requires a floor jack with about a 3-inch clearance. The underbody clearance of the non-performance Model 3 here is about 5 inches. So that gives you 3 inches for the jack stand, 2 inches for the jack pad, and a little room to work with. Now, the jack pads, there are several different brands. This is one by Reverse Logic, and it comes special for the Model 3, Model S, and the Model X, and so marked here. It's a clever little device. It's about $25. It's milled aluminum, has a rubber pad here, an indexing pin for the jack point, and a rubber O-ring that retains it in place so you can be stuck onto the bottom of the car and then your jack moved into place without having an extra hand or two to sort of hold everything in place while you deploy the jack itself. These jacks can be found for about $80 to $200 at Harbor Freight, depending on the capacity and whether aluminum or steel, but it's pretty handy to have around. Need something to block your wheels so your car doesn't roll away, and also, of course, apply your parking brake. You need a torque wrench to apply the proper 129 foot-pounds of torque to your lug nuts. Now there are a couple of pitfalls for torque wrenches here. You do want one with a deep 21mm socket like this one, or an extension with your 21mm socket. The handle length should be at least 16 to 18 inches to clear the tire, so you actually have a place to grab the end of the handle here, and it must go up to 129 foot-pounds of torque. This torque wrench, by contrast, has far too short of a socket, is only about 12 inches long, and only goes up to 80 foot-pounds of torque. So this is useless. Be careful when picking out your torque wrench. The final ingredient to this operation is the one that's a little unconventional, and that is a spare tire. This is an 18-inch rim, 5-lug pattern, 4.5-inch lug spacing. Now that 4.5 inches is the diameter of the circle that intersects all of the lug nuts. It's not the distance between the holes, so be careful when selecting this. Now you can buy one of these spare tires for a Tesla for about $300. If you need to have a spare that you intend to drive on, that's probably the route that I'd go. If you're just using a spare tire to swap your tires in the tire rotation every 6 months or so, this is a spare tire gotten out of the trunk of a car at a junkyard for 14 bucks. I probably wouldn't drive on this more than a couple of miles, but that's not what I bought it for. I bought it just to rotate the tires. So let me show you how we do it. Now the quick and dirty way to rotate your tires is simply to swap the rear for the front and vice versa, back and forth, and that will probably confer most of the benefits from rotating the tires, but the right tires never see the left side and vice versa. So some of the benefits that are had from swapping side to side aren't had. And this is done simply by jacking up the rear jack point, and obviously both the rear and not as obviously the front wheel will clear the ground. Jacked up and these tires swapped, and then on the right, and then you're done. Now you have to wonder if Tesla does that simply because it's easy and a mobile service tech could do it with one jack like this and simple tools without raising it on a stand or going through a procedure like I'm about to show you. So here is the jack point. This is the left front one. It's obviously very reinforced steel as part of the subframe of the car and is clear of the battery cover here, which you clearly want to avoid. We simply need to plug the jack pad into it, and it holds itself in place. Also be sure to apply the parking brake, and like so many things Tesla, it just totally makes sense. You press the park button and you just press and hold it in, and then you get the parking brake. That locks the rear wheels. Go ahead and engage your jack pad and your jack itself and just give it one pump to unload the suspension a little bit, but don't bring the wheel off the ground. Now if you have sport wheels, you'll need a special tool which comes with the car to remove that little center cover. If you have aero wheels like this, you'll need to remove the big plastic cover, and about half the time you just give it a little yank in the center and it'll come off. But if it doesn't, don't worry. You can pull each of these triangular sections off one by one to sort of detension the clipping mechanism, and then you can grab it from the center. It'll come right off like that. Loosen up your 5 lug nuts with an ordinary lug wrench, and I usually like to recommend using your own weight and gravity to do pushing down on the tool more so than pulling up, and sometimes you need to use a foot here. Once your lug nuts are loosened slightly, go ahead and raise the wheel completely off the ground by about an inch. Take these off the rest of the way by hand like that, or you can use your socket just to give you a little bit more to hold on to. I do the bottom nut last just to help it hold the wheel onto the hub to the last minute, and then when you do take out that bottom one, just put a toe against the bottom of the rim to hold it there while you remove that last one. You can carefully remove your wheel. Next, put on your spare. Put that bottom one on first, that'll hold everything in place. And go ahead and put on at least 3 of these lug nuts. Now go ahead and lower that down. I'll be ready to swap the wheels. Now we'll place what was on the left front in the right rear position here. Go ahead and let your jack down. And it's time to torque these down to the final specification. So set your torque wrench to 129 foot-pounds and go ahead and give this little locking knob a twist. And then I would recommend wrapping up this handle, as it has some very coarse exposed metal corners that could scratch your fender. Go ahead and wrap that up and something soft like a rag or towel, and try and do most of your work with the handle down in this lower 4 o'clock position of the wheel so that you don't risk hitting your fender. And go ahead and put it on your nut, and then pushing down until you receive that satisfying little torque wrench click. Repeat that in a star pattern until all 5 are done. Replacing the aero wheel cover is really simple. However, do remember that the valve stem does have a cutout here, so it's not perfectly symmetrical to slam on any way. So line that up with your valve stem there, and give it a little press in the center, and then each of the corners, and you're good to go. Then take that one that was on the right rear and swap it up to the right front. Next, bring that right front around to the left rear. Swap those. And finally, we're back to where we began. And it's the left rear brought up to the left front. Valve stem. Nice. Here's a closer look at that reverse logic jacking pad. You see it's broad enough to disperse the weight of the car against the jacking point itself and then engage the jack below, but not so big that you can easily get off axis like you could with, for example, a 2x4 section or a broader pad. It has this indexing pin which plugs into the jack point itself, so you're guaranteed to be lined up, and this O-ring holds it in place, yet it's easy enough to pull back out when you're done. And as a nice touch, it has this kind of rubber pad, so you're not even going to scratch under there, even though nobody ever is going to see it. A few more details about this spare I used for the procedure. It is a 5-lug pattern, 4.5-inch spacing, so that's a 4.5-inch diameter of the circle that intersects all of the lug bolt holes. And the center hole bore must be 64 millimeters, 2.5 inches. It's important to stick with that 18-inch rim diameter, not simply because you need that much diameter, or really the radius, to keep the car off the ground, but it has more to do with the space in between the rim to accommodate the brake rotor and the brake caliper. If you're hunting around for one of these spares, ask for an 18-inch donut spare, 5-lug, 4.5-inch spacing, and they'll be able to direct you probably to some location in the junkyard where you're likely to either find the spares as they are or the brand of cars that they're likely to be found in. Be sure to look in the trunks, look under the cover where the spares belong, but also look in the back seats. And fun fact, did you know the name for a tire, T-I-R-E, comes from the word attire, A-T-T-I-R-E, as in clothes, where the tire was meant to be the clothes for the wheel. It's no joke, look it up. So by whatever method you use, or whoever you choose to do it, be sure you do rotate your tires every 6,000 or 7,000 miles, whether you do the front to back or the 4-way that I've shown you. Also, don't neglect to have your suspension realigned as per the Tesla service guidelines, and also have your wheels balanced. I will rotate these tires myself 2 or 3 times, but then have them balanced in between times. Well, this has been Ted from Tesla Details. Hope that was a little bit of use for you, and we'll see you around next time. You know where to find me. Be well.